your phone, have gateway.com, and just follow along so that you can hear this wonderful story. Right. John chapter 11. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, village of Mary, and her sister Martha. It's Mary whose brother Lazarus now lay sick. It's the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days, and then said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, yet you are going back? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. After he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go, we may die with him. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. And the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out. They followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in the spirit and fell. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he's been there for 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me and know that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. And not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, and bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus as they stood in the temple courts, and they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" The chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it, so that they might arrest him.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Steve. I'm one of the pastors of Renew. It's really great to be with you this morning. We're going to be looking at that very story. It's an amazing story, and there's actually too much for us to cover in this one talk, which is why we have community groups throughout the week. It's why we deliberately have a kind of second bite of the cherry to be able to go over this passage in community week on week, so that we can get to grips with who Jesus is and how we might meet him. If you are not part of one of those, there's a lounge room size groups that meet across Canberra with Renew people through the week. That'd be really good to get in one of those. Come and chat to me afterwards. I'd love to plug you in. Let me pray for us, and then we'll get into this passage. Gracious Lord and loving Heavenly Father, we need your help today. There's this passage hits us with so much affect, so much strong emotion, and it pulls our loves in 1,000 different directions. So, Father, we pray that as we enter into this story, that you would help us to see the beautiful Jesus Christ in the midst of the pain of these women, in the midst of our own pain. And we ask that for Jesus' sake. Amen. When in your life have you most wanted to meet Jesus face to face? I think if we're honest, it's not usually the happy moments, when the sun is shining down on me, when the world's all as it should be. Very few of us in those times think to ourselves, "I demand a meeting with the Lord. Tell him what a bad job he's doing. Good, keep going. This is really great, God. You've got this." No, it's when hard stuff comes up. Perhaps there's a choice in front of us where to live out of step with what we know is the clear teaching of Jesus just seems so obvious, self-evidently desirable, completely in step with the culture around us. Or in moments of disruption where figuring out which way is up seems beyond us. But most of all, it's when we're in the presence of or in the experience of tremendous pain, great suffering. That's when we want a word, isn't it? That's when we want a word with Jesus. Lord, if you had been here. Jesus had three dear friends. They were siblings, actually, Mary, Martha, and Jesus. Sorry, and Lazarus, rather. They lived in Bethany, which is a town right on the edge of Jerusalem on the main road in. And Lazarus got sick, really sick, sick enough to frighten his sisters. Sick enough, they said to each other, "We need to get Jesus here right now." I mean, how often in world history has there been a person that you could point to and say, "I know for certain that they are the person who could fix this if they were here." They knew he could handle this, and so they sent word to it. Verse 3, "Lord, the one you love is ill." You've got to imagine this is pre-text message, pre-whatever. Like they had to send the message. They had to send a friend, go and find Jesus. He's days away. Please get him here as soon as you can. And they would have understood the danger they were inviting Jesus into. Jesus, earlier in the biography of Jesus in John, Jesus had to leave Judea because the Pharisees had decided, had attempted a vigilante execution against him. They had tried to stone him. That was the reason that Jesus wasn't about. He couldn't be called on easily. It wasn't safe. Well, actually, it's not that it wasn't safe, it's that his hour had not yet come. That's how Jesus puts it. Um, but these women needed help. This was the kind of moment where you hope the person that you're calling on is willing to put their personal safety to one side to come to the rescue. And a bit like last week with the healing of the man who was born blind, the story starts with a surprise. Have a look at verses 5 and 6 if you've got it there in front of you. If you don't, get it there in front of you. Look up BibleGateway.com and look up John chapter 11. Verses 5 and 6 says, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he ran there as soon as he could. He he made sure that he dropped what he was doing and just left. He just cleared his schedule. I've got to go be with Lazarus. Don't see that, does it? So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was 2 more days." And we say, what the, like, what? How on earth do those things go together? So, what is the so there for in these verses? He loved them so much that he with their desperate request that he come soon. This is a discordant note, isn't it? At Christmas, we celebrate Emmanuel, God with us. Well, he wasn't with them. Friends, this is tough for us, and it is especially tough for us, those of us who find ourselves in the middle hour of our grief. The rest of this chapter is here to unpick that particular not for us. But if you're here and you feel like, yeah, actually, I would like a word with the Lord, then John chapter 11 is the story for you. The rest of this chapter is going to show this family and us by extension who Jesus is and what he came to do. Those are the two things that get put together as the most satisfying news and and circumstance that your heart needs. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to see when Jesus is interacting with the sisters, we're going to see who he is. And when we see him at the tomb, we're going to see what he came to do. Okay, you with me? That's where we're going today. So note takers, just put them up like that. So picture the scene. Jesus walking up the hill to Bethany. Bethany, as I said, is the main road into Jerusalem at the time, and it's sort of halfway up the hill towards Mount Zion. The household gets the word that Jesus is coming, and Martha spots him a way off and runs down to meet him, but Mary doesn't, which is an interesting detail. Notice both women say exactly the same thing when they see him. Look at verse 23 and verse 32, if you can kind of do this as you're looking at it. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Two women, same situation, same grief, same words, completely different response from Jesus. Did you notice that? With Martha, Jesus basically starts an argument. Uh, he says, "I am the resurrection and the life. It's never too late. I'm here now." But with Mary, he doesn't say a thing. See, with Martha, Jesus stands against the flow of her heart. He resists her sorrow and calls her to hope. But with Mary, he just enters right into it. We're not told. This is one of those stories where some of the detail is in between the lines. We're not told why Mary didn't go out, but we can kind of guess, can't we? She was furious with him. She was furious that Jesus, where Martha's question came out of a place of confusion. Mary's came with white hot rage. She didn't want to be near Jesus. And so she didn't go out initially. Eventually, someone goes in and says, "Hey, listen, Jesus is here and he wants to talk to you." And she runs out to him. Is she running out happy that he's here now? Doesn't look like it. Everyone else, the Jewish folk who are around, as she assumed she was running to the tomb, she's running out apoplectic at Jesus. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." With Martha, uh, in Jesus' argument, he's declaring his goddishness, isn't he? He says he has the power over death. With Mary, he's demonstrating his humanity. He's not aloof to our pain. His response to each of them demonstrates that he is both God and man, the God man. So first of all, with Martha, he doesn't just say, "I have access to divine power. I can hook you up." No, he says, "I am resurrection power. The God who gives life to the dead and calls into being the things which are not. That's me. I'm that God. Don't be afraid." Bracing, actually. It's bracing the way that he talks to Martha. But with Mary, he's showing himself to be very human, God in flesh. He's showing himself to be the God who is completely human. In spite of the claim to deity, he is really man, weak and weeping. He doesn't sit a foot above our pain, just kind of watching on. No, he enters right in. We don't have one who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses in Jesus. There is no one like him, friends. There is no one like Jesus. Allah, the God of the Muslims, is described in the Quran as beneficent, watchful, strong, eternally living, the one who loves his obedient slaves. But he doesn't know our weakness. To suggest he would is an heretical thought in Islam. How could Allah know weakness? How could he? He's all powerful. It's so gross, the Muslims, to suggest that he might. I once had a very spirited conversation at the multicultural festival with a Muslim evangelist who had a stall there. Um, it was a few years back. He asked me, "Tell me, this Jesus, your God, um, it was so self-evidently obvious to him that a God who had biological functions like needing to go to the bathroom is no God at all. How could he be God if he needed to expel waste?" No, there is no one like Jesus, willing to come and be like us. On the other hand, on every billboard across Canberra, you'll see like the community notice boards all around Canberra. You see posters: "Come to this set of 6 week six sessions by this guru and find inner contentment and peace." TikTok influencers abound who are going to tell you, have figured out the secret to contentment or joy or peace or whatever, and they'll share that secret with their Patreons. But these people can't do anything about our circumstances, can they? There's no power behind their words. Jesus is fully God. Jesus is fully human. And there are mountains of books that are written on what that means. They often use this uh, technical Greek term, the hypostatic union. And I could bore you to tears with a dry lecture about how that works, its functions, how it all goes together. But far better, I think, is to show you why this truth is exactly what your heart needs. Because Jesus is both God and man, he is our wonderful counselor, friends. See, with Martha, he gives her a brisk response, and with Mary, he just enters in and gives no advice at all and just supports her, loves her, and cares for her and grieves with her. Jesus knew not to meet Martha in tears, and he knew not to meet Mary in truth. Now I'm a pastor, which means I do a fair bit of meeting up with people and talking through problems and challenges. That's one of the tremendous privileges of my role. And many of you as well. Like if you're a parent, you're doing this with your children all the time. If you're, many of you are in caring professions where you're going to be doing this stuff as well. If you're a good friend, you'll be doing this as well. And one of the frustrations of that kind of when someone shares something and it's big and it's hard. Um, one of the challenges, one of the frustrations of that kind of counselling is it often feels tricky to know whether truth or tears is what's called for in this situation. Some people need confrontation. Some people need closed mouth compassion. And the wrong response in the wrong moment, in either direction, will be harmful, right? And regularly we get this wrong because we have temperaments. We kind of lean towards one or the other. You're probably right now thinking, oh no, I'm more of a truth person. Oh no, I'm more of a tears person. And we have temperaments that kind of direct us in one or the other of those directions, or we just we just miss it. We miss the signals. We don't pick it up because we just we can't get in here for the other person. Regularly we get it wrong, but not Jesus, because he is infinitely high and infinitely low and infinitely wise. He gets it and he knows what we need. How many times have I been reading the Bible myself or in community group or listening to teaching at church on a Sunday, and I thought, man alive, that is exactly what I needed to hear right now. But here's the other thing that our heart needs. Here's the other way that Jesus, being both God and man, is really, really good news for us. It means that he's an absolute beauty, actually. I love verse 43 in our story. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Looking Jesus, looking at Jesus being both fully God and fully man makes him a singularly worthy place to put your worship. Nothing else can carry it. Nothing else deserves your praise like he does. When you see those things brought together, the highness and the lowliness, the power and the humility, the greatness with no pomposity, when you see them together, it changes things. It changes things, friends. You realize that he is the place that deserves your attention. At Christmas, we sing, veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, don't we? Um, you can't look at the sun directly without burning out your eyes. You need a filter to see the beauty of it. When you look at Jesus Christ, when you're looking at the glory of God, it's like a filter. You're looking at the glory of God with the filter of human nature, and only there can you see the absolute beauty that draws your heart out and will reorder your loves and will change you from the inside out. So first of all, we see who he is in this story, that he is the God man, that he meets them exactly as we need him to. But then he goes to the tomb to meet Lazarus, and not just to meet Lazarus, but to meet an enemy. And here we learn something about what he came to do. What did he come to do? Well, the first thing he came to do was he came to fight for us. He came to fight for us. Jesus Jesus didn't speak English. This pains me greatly as a person who loves the English language. But what we have in our Bibles, the Bibles that you have in your hands right now, are translations of the ancient Greek language, and sometimes English translators are wimps. Um, in verse 33 and verse 38, we're told that Jesus was deeply moved. That's the way that we've got it kind of translated in our Bibles. But the Greek word that sits behind that translation generally means furious. Jesus was furious. The main context that that word gets used in other texts that we have, other bits that have been written around the same time that the Bible was written, was to describe the screaming of a charging bull. Um, he's coming to the tomb, absolutely furious, flying at it, ready for a fight. And who's he angry at? Who's he angry at? Well, he's not angry at the family. Remember how he answered that question at the start of the passage last week. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was suffering? It's not that specific sin doesn't lead to specific suffering in this kind of context, right? He's not looking at the sisters and thinking, well, you should have prayed more or whatever more so that he didn't die. Nor is he angry at himself. We talked about this last week. Death and suffering are part of the world that we live in because of global humanity's sin, because of all of us, all of our sin. Death is the wage that sin pays out. It's what happens when we turn from the author of life. When you turn from the author of life, you are choosing death. It's not a shock that Lazarus died. So he's not angry at the family, he's not angry at himself, but he is angry at death. He is angry at death. He's coming at it. He's not stoic, saying, "Oh well, it's just an inevitability. We'll just get over it." Jesus is charging like a bull at our enemy. He's raging against the dying of the light. I love imagining Jesus at the mouth of the tomb. This is one of my favorite. I could daydream about this. Jesus at the mouth of the tomb, yelling at Lazarus to come out, and death, who had his clutches on Lazarus, cowering in the corner of the cave, going, "All right, off you go." Amazing. Out he comes. Utterly astonishing. But there's a problem with this sign. There's a problem with this miracle. If it's true that evil and suffering and death are actually a death sentence um, of the human race, is when we die, when we see death around us, we're experiencing the world as we've kind of let it be. How can Jesus Christ do anything about this sentence if we deserve it? How can he destroy death without destroying us? And the answer is, this miracle shows us not only that he came to fight for us, but that he also came to die for us. And you say, hang on, where does it say that? Well, this event is the turning point in the whole book of John. You could basically take a knife and cut John right at the end of this story, and you've divided the story in two. The first half, chapters 1 to 11, is about the life of Jesus. And from here on in, it's going to be about the death of Jesus and the resurrection. This is the turning point of the book. This miracle has been utterly decisive and completely public. Jesus just raised a guy from the dead a couple of kilometers from Jerusalem. Everyone knows about it. People are coming, they're flocking out from Jerusalem to come and see this astonishing thing. A guy had been dead for 4 days. You don't get resuscitated from that. They had done the things that you do to a body to make it prepared for death. They knew he was dead. And he's now back to life and he's walking around and he's able to give testimony to the fact that he was dead and is alive again. This is going to be a problem for the religious leader and political elites. Look there at verse 45. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done. We don't know whether this is like dobbing or if they're just like, my goodness, did you hear this amazing news? See you. And the Pharisees are like, ah. Um, but uh, then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. This is like calling a meeting of the Supreme Court or the High Court of Australia or something like that, mixed in with like um, the you know the a religious like the Vatican or something like that as well. What are we accomplishing? They're asking themselves. Here's a man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away our temple and our nation. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You don't realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish. He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he had prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for the nation, but for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and to make them one. So from that day, they plotted to take his life. It was the act of raising Lazarus from the dead that signed Jesus' death warrant. It was that. It was that convinced him that we really need to get rid of this guy. He's gone too far. Now he's got to go. So Jesus knew that the only way to get Lazarus out of the tomb was if he went in. And therefore, Jesus knew that the only way he can stop our funerals being a finality was to cause his own. He had to go to the cross. The only way to get us out of death's jaws was for the teeth to close down on him. The people of Bethany spoke better than they knew when they said, "See how he loved him." Jesus was willing to go to the grave so that Lazarus could be rescued out from it. Caiaphas spoke way better than he knew. One man was going to die for the nation of Israel. And not just for the nation of Israel, but for the scattered children of God from every nation and tribe and tongue, so that we could be gathered in. He took the exact wrong message from that prophecy, didn't he? Friends, the people could look at Jesus and say, "See how he loved him." We can see the Easter story as a whole. We're going to get to do that next weekend. And we can say, "Behold how he loves us." Just want to for four implications of what we've been talking about today. Four quick implications. Firstly, Jesus is an ally in our suffering. He's an ally in our suffering. It is easy to misfire when you're in grief. It's, you often hear people say hurt people, and I think that's really true. It's easy for us to get cranky in the wrong directions, and cranky is too small a word. It's easy for us to get filled with rage, the rage that comes from tremendous suffering. At Jesus. Friends, I hope you can see in this story that he has come to rescue you. That because of Jesus' death, your life can never ultimately be a tragedy. Tragedies, you know how they work, right? You can kind of draw them like a smile or a frown. Um, the way a tragedy works is things start out bad, they get good for a bit, but then you lose it all. Comedy, on the other hand, things start out well, there might be some hardness, but it ends up everyone's happy. There's a big party at the end, or if it's a Bollywood film or something like that, everyone's dancing. Um, uh, sad smile. Your life can never ultimately be a tragedy, because on the day that Jesus returns, he will call your name. and he will take your grey clothes off and say, you don't need those anymore. I've got something different for you to wear. He is our Emmanuel. He is God with us. He gets our suffering. Every other God is aloof to our suffering, really. They don't get it. Every other place that you could direct your worship, they don't get it. Jesus gets it. He drank the cup of suffering right down to the bottom. He knows exactly what you're going through, and he loves you through it. And he promises that this will not be forever. And in fact, forever is going to be amazing. Secondly, all love entails suffering. All love entails suffering. I asked at the beginning of this talk, you can imagine the women saying to themselves, well, I really hope Jesus is willing to put down his kind of concern for his own safety so that he can come and rescue us. That's exactly what he did, right? That's exactly what he came to do, to put down the joy of the Trinity so that he could come and rescue us. It was an astonishing act of love, but you need to know that all love involves suffering. Those of you who are parents, um, this is such a dumb example, but go with me. My kids, my boys, love the board game Battleship. Have you ever played the board game Battleship as a grown up? It's terrible. It's so boring. It's mind numbing, and it's so bad. It's especially bad when you're teaching them how to play. So you have to be on both sides, so you know where the boats are, and like there's no challenge to it. It's super boring, and like I hate it so much. And the pictures on the box have dads, always dads, looking so happy to be playing with their kids. And I have memories of my dad playing Battleship with me and thinking that he was having a good time. And now I know for certain that he was not having a good time while we were playing. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we do this to ourselves? It's because by doing that thing with them, we're helping them grow, right? It's unpleasant. There's a give it like I watch the clock as we're playing this game. It takes like a short game is 25 minutes, and I think I'm never going to get that 25 minutes back. Like it's gone now, and it's like this. Um, and they need that, right? We need to be willing to give up our lives, those are sort of parents, for our children. If we don't, what's the consequence if we don't? We could just say, you're on your own, you figure it out, and they'll turn out terribly. Love involves suffering. The same with friends. You might have friends who go through something difficult, and you kind of think, oh, all right, I'll check in with them and see how they're going. They kind of glob onto you, and they're like, okay, like I'm like, please be the person that I rely on for strength or whatever. And you're like, oh, I'm the type it is. Um, all love involves suffering, and this is the life that Jesus is inviting you into. Actually, he's saying, if you're going to follow me, it's actually going to mean that you live a slightly smaller life than you could have lived if you didn't have attachments with other people. Um, if you didn't allow other people to monopolize your time. There's another game with terrible monopoly. But but this is the life that Jesus is inviting us into. It's saying this is the path to joy. Actually, um, this is the path to this is the path to love, and I've shown you exactly what love looks like. And so I'm inviting you to be like me. Thirdly, if he's done this for you, then you need to be willing to take off the limitations that you place on Jesus to be in charge of your life. If you see that this is the kind of person who's given up everything for you, if Jesus did pay it all, then all to him we do owe. Yeah. Like we can't say, All right, Jesus, I'm inviting you into my life so that you can be my personal assistant in this particular area that I'm struggling with right now. And once we've dealt with that, I'll wait in the waiting room and I'll call on you when I need you again. No, no. If he is this kind of savior, then he needs to be that kind of Lord. He needs to be the kind of God that speaks into all of your life, not just the bits that you're comfortable with him speaking into. Lastly, don't let death, the fear of death, control you. You say, oh, it doesn't. It's okay. I'm young. It doesn't. What is FOMO? But a fear of death. If I don't get the Taylor Swift tickets, I'll miss out, and I'll never get to. All of us, to some extent, are controlled by the realization that the vaudeville hook of death is going to pull us by the neck one day straight off stage. There is nothing, there is no joy that you can experience on earth that will not be improved 100-fold in glory. And so missing out now is nothing compared to the incomparable greatness and excellencies of life forever with him. It means that you become bulletproof, actually. It means that giving up your life is not a scary thing for Jesus to ask of you because you know what he's going to give you, because you know that he knows your name. And on that day, he will do it again. Friends, this might be fresh for you. You've not really thought about this before. You've not really considered that Jesus could be that kind of savior, that kind of Lord, boss, king for you as well. Can I urge you to come to him? Put your trust in him, to fall at his feet in your grief if you're in it. And to say to him, Lord, I believe. I believe that you are who you say you are. And that because of that, I am who you say I am.